This is a wonderful problem to have. I think it's the first time where we are scared that there may not be enough seats. It's great. Charlie, you're quite a draw. Where's Charlie? You're our star tonight. Good evening, everybody. It is my distinct pleasure to welcome you to Watson Library for this evening's event in honor of Professor Emeritus Charley Stansifer. Originally, we had planned to host this event upstairs on the 5th floor in International Area Studies, but due to the RSVPs, it's clear why we couldn't stay upstairs, and so we had to come to the West Wing here in Watson. I'm pleased to say that there are about 120 of you here tonight. It's one of our larger crowds, so thank you very, very much for coming out to support this. And I'd also like to include Charlie's son, Ryan, and his two daughters who are joining us here tonight, and his partner, Mary Miller, who looks absolutely stunning tonight. And the many, many friends and colleagues. It's simply, with all of you here, being on the 5th floor was just not an option, but I'm so glad to see so many of you here. My name is Lorraine Harrycombe, and I'm the Dean of Libraries here at KU. And during my 5-year tenure at KU Libraries, I've had the privilege of working with Charlie, most notably as he served on the KU Libraries Board of Advocates. Well, let me just tell you a little story. About the first week after I arrived on campus in my office, guess who was the first person in my door? It's a librarian's dream. Charlie is busily, you'll hear a little bit later about this, busily packing up his papers and his collections from his basement for the library, and he's meticulously packing it, sorting it, organizing it, each piece, touching each piece personally. It's a librarian's dream. It's coming already, sorted and organized. KU Libraries Board of Advocates is a distinguished group of individuals, many of whom are here in the audience with us tonight, and they serve as the chief volunteer group here at KU Libraries. Our members encourage alumni and friends to donate their time, their talent, and the resources in support of programs and services provided by KU Libraries. And this is certainly something that Charlie has taken to heart. Through the gift of more than 20,000 volumes Latin American books, pamphlets, and papers, Charlie's contribution serves to deepen an already substantial collection, a collection that Charlie helped to create. Our Professor Stansifer came to KU in the fall of 1963. He served as chair of the Latin American Studies from 1975 to 1989, and among other successes, he was successful in gaining funding for the Tri-University Center of Latin American Studies in 1976. Charlie also served as chair of the History Department from 1993 to 1996, then as a visiting professor at the Air War College from 1989 to 1990. Throughout his 42-year career at KU, he worked tirelessly to strengthen the library holdings in Latin America, and especially the Central American area, and to increase faculty members in all areas of Latin American studies, especially Mexico and Central America. And when I say he worked tirelessly to strengthen our collections, I'm not speaking in hyperbole. Charlie personally transported thousands and thousands of volumes from almost all of the countries of Latin America right here to KU, where they still reside today. Beyond that, Charlie served on more than 300 graduate exams, including our own Associate Dean. Where's Kent Miller? Kent Miller is way in the back there. Kent is Associate Dean here in the libraries, and he was one of Charlie's students.
The first one.
He was the first one. Kent, you didn't tell me that. He was Charlie's first master student. Charlie is known not only for his vast volumes of research and published volumes, but also for his sense of humor and love of limericks, and perhaps most notably, bananas. Charley retired in December of 2004, but thankfully he's remained an active scholar and ardent supporter of KU libraries. At this point, I'd like to invite Jana Krentz, Ibero-American bibliographer and head of KU Libraries International Area Studies program, to the podium.
Probably. Okay, let's see. As I was walking around during the party, I heard at least 3 stories of how Charley Stansifer changed people's lives, how he got them into their careers, or he helped them in some way that got them started on their way. And what I'm going to be talking about today is how he got our Latin American collections on the way, how he changed the direction of our collections and influenced them so they'll never be the same. I'm so honored, and I'm going to try to do this without getting misty. And I'm so pleased to recognize Charley Stansifer's contributions to the libraries and to be able to thank him publicly for all he's done for our Latin American collections. In my entire career, I have never met a faculty member who's as dedicated and passionate about the libraries as Charley Stansifer. In November, we will be celebrating the 50th anniversary of the Center for Latin American Studies, and it seems fitting that we're recognizing Charley's contributions to the library today because his career is so meshed. It meshed so closely with both the excellence of the library and with the center. When the dean said that Charley has worked tirelessly to strengthen the collections and that she was not speaking in hyperbole, I swear she was looking behind my shoulder when I was typing up these words, because it's exactly the same thing I said. It is not hyperbole to say that more than any other person, Charley Stansifer is responsible for the overall collection, overall excellence of our Latin American collections. I mean, our Latin American collections would still exist. They'd still be here. But without his intervention, they would not have the unique quality that they have, and they certainly would not be the national and international treasure that it is today. They'd probably be like Nebraska's or something. So the only way that I can illustrate this is by giving you a little history lesson about our collections here. So let me tell you a story. The history of the Latin American collections at the University of Kansas presents us with the extraordinary story of individuals who constructed a vision of what a Latin American collection should be that has taken Kansas into the 21st century. What makes this story so exceptional is that with single-mindedness and strength of will, those individuals endeavored to make that vision a reality within such a short period of time. And Charley was at the center of it all. In 1957, KU had a pretty good Spanish department, and KU Libraries had a solid collection of the literary canon. So if you wanted to read the Quixote, we could do that for you. Or Lope de Vega, or even Rubén Darío, or Isaacs Maria. We could do that for you. But books about Latin America and the Caribbean, on history, on politics, religion, social sciences, law, education, written in Spanish, we did not have. They were non-existent in this library. And then Sputnik happened. And the US government realized there were not enough people who spoke foreign languages. We didn't know about the cultures of other countries. And so something had to change. And under the leadership of Franklin Murphy, of Chancellor Franklin Murphy, the university became committed to the establishment of area studies programs and strong foreign language programs. So in those days, the faculty here at KU had the responsibility for book selection through something called the Latin American Studies Committee and a committee in the Department of History. And guess who was on those committees? And shortly after Charley got here, as a young professor, KU Libraries embarked on what has been called as, and this is a quote, the most aggressive Central American acquisitions efforts in the world. It was very difficult to procure Latin American books in those days. It was almost impossible. And the Latin American faculty embarked on buying trips in order to ferret out those materials and purchase private collections in Latin America. Over 40 buying trips were undertaken in 20 years by the faculty, and guess who? He did quite a few of them. The Linares collection from Costa Rica was purchased in 1964, the Alvarado Garcia collection from Honduras in 1966. And these collections formed the core of our outstanding Central American collections. Have Charley tell you sometime about waiting on the dock of some Central American port surrounded by boxes containing the Linares collection. And he waited for hours to make sure that those books got on some slow boat to Kansas. And then in 1968, the Latin American Area Studies Committee lobbied for a new cutting-edge position here at the libraries called a bibliographer. A bibliographer for Ibero-America. And guess who was behind that? And I've only gotten through the 1960s. But I think you can see where I'm headed here. Charley has never stopped buying books for the libraries. He has always had an uncanny eye for finding these little private collections here and there that would augment our rare book collections. Working as a library's agent, his purchase of rare book collections is what makes KU exceptional among Latin American library collections in the United States. And his passion for Costa Rica dictated the direction this library would take in collecting materials. And as a result, we have one of the best Central American collections in the world. In addition, he has had this passion for the Paraguayan partners, and that has ensured that our collection is pretty solid in Paraguay as well. His efforts were key in securing the William Griffith Endowment, which is used to purchase Latin American materials. And even his professional contacts with other universities and scholars has benefited our collections. So I have another story. There's a university down the road, and they decided to weed out all their foreign materials, in this case Costa Rican, out of their archives. And one of the history professors there just happened to be walking by, saw all this stuff in the trash, took it out of the trash, and called Charley. And as a result, the KU Latin American collection is now known for his historic Costa Rican photographs from the 1890s. I feel extraordinarily lucky to have been the head of the Department for Spain and Latin America while Charley has been in residence here. He has made my job a joy. Would you say he's the librarian's dream? And I wanted to thank him from the bottom of my heart for all he has done for KU. And in closing, I just want to say that we have a darn good collection on the banana industry.
And now for the moment Charley's been waiting and preparing for so long. Please join me in welcoming Charley Stansifer.
Well, thank you, Jonna, very much, and thank you all for being here. It's just absolutely amazing to see so many people here. just because I bought a lot of books for Latin America. I have three preliminary comments. I'd like to thank the KU Library staff for showing such strong interest in my collection efforts. Much as I love books, I'm not a librarian.
Why not?
But I've had close and enjoyable connections with the KU Library staff since my arrival here in 1963. And I've had a strong interest in KU's library acquisition from the beginning, as been indicated. Yes, I've been actively engaged in purchasing books for KU. This is not an activity that brings raises and promotions to professors. But let me tell you, it does have rewards. This is one reward right here, and it has been fun. And my talk tonight is built around personal reminiscences of collection. But I want to state at the outset that there were many people involved besides myself. The KU libraries were blessed with an amazing dedicated bunch of Latin American book collectors. I call them the radical librarians. Rachel Miller, Shelley Miller, Ellen Brown, Rhonda Nuggebauer, and of course, Jonna Krantz. They just didn't wait for the books to be sent here. They were ready to go after them. They did not leave the book buying to agents. They were ready to go to the field to get them. And I'd like to compliment personally Bill Crow, Rick Clement, Jonna Krantz, Rebecca Smith, Lorraine Harrican, and the Spencer and Watson staff for putting up with me for my commitments. And there's my friend Kent Miller, who was my first MA student, as you heard, after my arrival at KU. He's responsible for getting all of my books from my house to the library. So now let's get to some of the specific cases that stand out in my mind. And Costa Rica is a good place to start. The KU-UCR connection, University of Costa Rica connection, goes back a long ways. In my mind, 1917. It was significant because that's when Juan de Osman began his career in the KU Spanish department. He was Spanish, but he had taught in Costa Rica, and he came here with his wife and later his children. Costa Rican students began to come here in the 1920s and the 1930s. And in 1946, and this was my most stirring comments, 11 of the 23 foreign students at KU were Costa Ricans. So this was an extraordinary situation that KU was dealing with, so many Costa Ricans outnumbering all the other foreign students. This helped lead to a formal exchange relationship between KU and UCR in 1958-59, and it coincided precisely with the Farmington Plan. In the 1920s, many U.S. universities had decided to focus on specific foreign areas for special collections, but little attention was given to Latin America. Robert Talmadge and Robert Vosper of KU contributed to the inclusion of Latin America. They were the KU librarians, and it made sense to them to include Latin America. And I see Phyllis Talmadge sitting there right here. Raise your hand. So she knows about this. Because the KU-UCR relationship was just getting underway. I don't want to get into too much historical detail here, but KU was already linked to Costa Rica. One of the first actions was the purchase of the Lina's collection, which has been mentioned. And my understanding, I watched and supported it, but it was Bob Nunley and the library staff who were primarily responsible for the purchase of this group of books. And Linus and his wife had been teaching at KU in 1961, 1962. I didn't arrive until 1963. Then there's the case of Albert E. Palmerly, a geography student at KU. He was a member of the first group of KU students who spent a year in Costa Rica in 1960. With the help of UCR geographers and historians, he collected maps of Costa Rica. The result, maps of Costa Rica. And an annotated cartobibliography. This is an amazing book, and it's one that gets you started on the collection idea. An annotated cartobibliography. It was published, oh, and I should emphasize this, it was published by the University of Kansas Libraries, not the University of Kansas publisher. This brings up an issue which most of you are probably aware of. The KU Press does not publish on Latin America. Ask me about that later if you wish. All this was happening at the same time that the Farmington Plan was getting underway. U.S. university libraries realized that no single university could take care of all of Latin America. So they agreed on a plan to divide up collecting responsibilities. Texas got Mexico, of course. Vanderbilt got Brazil and so on. And KU, of course, got Costa Rica. KU was underway with its focus on Costa Rica. It didn't hurt that the first Peace Corps group to go to Costa Rica came from KU. The affair involved KU professors and KU students. A couple of years later, I visited Shelley Miller, daughter of my partner Mary, at the Library of Congress in Washington, D.C., where she was working. I also, she introduced me to the Library of Congress staff members, and I learned that few U.S. universities showed any interest in Central America at all. I also learned from her and other staff members that the Central American countries did not turn out many books per year. Justification, I concluded, that KU should focus on Central America. All this led me to urge the library to buy everything it could from the 5 Central American countries, plus Panama and Belize. KU began to give major attention to all these countries. Except for Texas and Tulane is my alma mater, most U.S. universities were not interested in Central America. I'm confident, but by 1985, KU rivaled Tulane and Texas for collections of all the Central American countries. And I am confident, as has been said, that we are way ahead of them now. 2 other factors contributed to the advancement of the KU collection on Central America. The first was the arrival of my mentor, Bill Griffith, as director of the Center of Latin American Studies to KU in 1970. He was at Tulane. We have something in common. He got his MA at Wichita State, and so did I. Bill got fed up with Tulane and came to KU in 1970. And by the way, he's a native Kansan. He was director of the center, and I was associate director. When Bill Griffith stepped down as director in 1975, I took his place. He didn't think we had a chance to get federal support from for the center from the government. I was more confident. I applied right away, and KU won federal support, not only for KU, but for Wichita State and KU. TUCLAS, the Tri-University Center of Latin American Studies. Well, I have to say it only lasted 5 years, but it was just too complicated for the 3 of them to cooperate. Now more about Bill. Well, I should add that the grant gave attention to the need for books on Central America, and so there was part of the money that was directed toward funding for book purchases. Now more about Bill. His focus was mainly on Guatemala. He lived in Guatemala for a while. When he came to KU, he brought a splendid collection of Guatemalan material, much of it dating all the way back to the 18th century through the 19th and 20th centuries. He was a book lover. He traveled all through Guatemala to towns and bought books. I followed his lead. I ran into people who knew him from before in Guatemala and Honduras. Upon retirement in 1984, his collection was professionally evaluated at $300,000. He sold it to KU for 1/3 its value and gained a tax write-off. And upon his death in 2003, KU acquired the remainder of his collection and the remainder of his estate to the KU libraries to buy material to Central American history. That was $320,000. And a footnote, I guess that's what you want to call it. In the 1990s, I gave a large collection of Chilean books to KU. How did I get interested in Chile? Well, I couldn't find a job when I got my PhD on Central America. Nobody cared about Central America. So I was fortunate enough to get a grant to go to Chile. And so I was retraining myself as a South Americanist in Chile. And yes, I bought a lot of books on Chile. And so I started collecting. And when I got the job at KU, and I was in Chile when I got the job at KU, I gave my Chilean collection valued at $4,500 to KU. Now let's focus on some specific Costa Rican collections. There's the Tobias Zúñiga collection. I found a pile of his papers in a used bookstore in San Jose in 1966 and bought them. I lived in Costa Rica that year and made regular visits to his store. He had an attic over these special items, and so I had to get up and crawl around in the attic. But I never went to Costa Rica without going to this store. That's where I got a complete bound set of the important journal called Ariel. That's where I got a complete bound set of the Índice Bibliográfico de Costa Rica, the bibliographic index of Costa Rica. The owner of the company saved these items for me. They knew that I would be back. Now back to Zúñiga. He was a Costa Rican diplomat assigned to El Salvador in 1917, 1919. And later was a member of the National Assembly and as ambassador to El Salvador. Copies of his speeches, his scrapbooks, and his activities in the National Assembly are all in the KU possession. Then there's the Casement collection. This is one of my favorite stories. Dan Casement was a famous railroad builder who lived in Manhattan, Kansas. He got the contract to build the Costa Rica Railway from San Jose to the West Coast. This was in the 1901-1904 period. I had a friend at Kansas State named Jim Carey who called me one day and asked me if KU wanted the Casement collection, as he had found that the KSU library was going to throw it out. That shocked me. I didn't know much about it, but I knew who Casement was, so I said, sure. So KU refused it also. So I kept it under my desk in my office for 25 years. Finally, a few years ago, I confessed to Jonna Krantz that I had this material. And she suggested right away that I might see if the Kansas collection would be interested. Duh, Casement was a Kansas. I didn't even think about that. So the Casement collection was brought to Spencer Library. And allow me to insert a quick comment on the importance of this gift. In 1999, KU, I helped arrange a major symposium on Costa Rica, and it was the 40th anniversary of the KU University of Costa Rica relationship. We put up exhibits everywhere we could on campus. Some of you will remember this. And the Casement collection, photos and everything, went on display in Spencer. I proudly took the rector of the University of Costa Rica over to see it. Was he surprised? Well, yes. He used to live in that house. He had been raised in that same house that Casements had lived in during the early 20th century. And by the way, President Arias of Costa Rica gave the principal speech at that symposium in 1999. Another exhibit was the 70 or 80 theses and dissertations on Central American topics. Visitors from Central America were very impressed by that exhibit. That was also at Spencer. They were just amazed at how many theses and dissertations were available that had been done by Costa Rica, Central Americans at that time. Now let me tell you about the Ernesto Alvarado Garcia collection. I met Don Ernesto of the Maine for the first time in Tegucigalpa, Honduras in 1965. He was director of the Maine Library and Archives of Honduras. I went to talk to him and found out that he had just lost his job. On my walk back to the hotel that day, I noticed him consoling himself at a bar. I joined him for a drink. He invited me to stop by his house the next day, and I did, just 2 hours before I was headed for the airport. I found that he had built a separate house for his books behind his law office. It consisted of 2 large rooms, one above the other. Every wall was with shelves to the ceiling filled with books. There was a large table in each room, crammed with books. To get up the stairs, I had to walk on books. He obviously needed money. He was out of a job. But to make a long story short, I convinced Jim Hellier, acquisitions librarian, to buy the collection. KU paid $5,000 for 18,000 books on Central America and the Caribbean. It cost more to get them here than it did to pay for them, than to buy them. It also took, if I'm correct, 15 years to catalog all the books and shelve them. It's no surprise that we have had a lot of students at KU doing research on Honduras. Now let's shift our attention to Paraguay for a moment. Since the late 1970s, Kansas and Paraguay have been sister states. Paraguay, perhaps because of the long history of dictatorship, was neglected by U.S. scholars. Hard to do research on Paraguay. Libraries and archives have been neglected. And I remember going to the archives and being told that they had nothing before the year 1900. Nothing. No books after 1900. Or no documents. I thought it was our duty as a sister state to collect Paraguayan materials. With library support, we stepped up our interest in acquisition of Paraguayan materials, and soon afterwards, a McBlain book catalog from North Carolina landed on my desk. I did have connections with several dealers. I noticed that several Paraguayan items were scattered throughout the catalog, not one by one, but scattered throughout the catalog as if they were being hidden. I alerted SPLAT, Spain, Portugal, and Latin America, and we began negotiations, and we ended up buying all the Paraguayan items. The materials all came from Natalicio Gonzalez, a historian and former president of Paraguay. He died while serving as Paraguay's ambassador to Mexico, and apparently what happened was someone who worked for him collected all of his books and sold them to this outfit in North Carolina. So we've been negotiating with Paraguayan universities to share this wealth of information, but we have a tremendous Paraguayan collection as well. I have 3 more book acquisitions to tell you about. A few years ago, thanks to Peter Hurley, right over there, I met Francisco Flores Andino of Honduras. He is an ex-priest who had collected lots of books on Honduras. Now, Mary and I have made 3 trips to Honduras to purchase his books for KU. In one sense, it is a shame to take these books away from Honduras, but the facilities in Honduras are so poor, so little protected, that I feel justified in saving them. Because he was a priest, many items were religious. And that's good. We have not really focused on religion, or at least not that I knew of. But he also has collected lots of material on indigenous people of Paraguay. After a while, Francisco began to bring books to Dallas, where his son moved to Dallas, and so he began to bring books to Dallas. And Mary and I made 2 trips to Dallas to pick up books. He currently has another list of books to sell, but we are not driving to Dallas to get them. Not yet, anyway. Now, next, there is the interesting case of Jean Mueller. And Diana Mueller is over there. She used to be my secretary. Okay. He was a PhD student of mine and book lover like me. He acquired books while studying in Spain, Argentina, and Central America. And KU even hired him to buy books in Central America and Mexico. His many trips to Central America slowed up completion of his dissertation. It took him a little longer than usual, but eventually he completed it. And by the way, I just have to add a comment. he was visiting me at my house one day, and we were both sitting on the porch, and the phone rang inside, and I went in to answer the phone, and it was from Hayes, the University of Kansas in Hayes. They wanted to know if I had anybody to suggest for a position in Latin American history. And I said, yeah, he's sitting right out in front. Sure enough, he got the job at Hayes, but eventually moved to El Paso for a community and began teaching at a community college. And I should add that he fell in love with my secretary and married her. I visited them several times at their home in El Paso, and their garage was just absolutely loaded with books. You couldn't see what all of them were because you couldn't get through the back side. Unfortunately, Gene died about 3 years ago while visiting his hometown of Grand Island, Nebraska. Diana mentioned that years ago he had rented a space for possession for his possessions in a storage facility. We supposed that it was furniture. But it turned out that there were 600 books in the storage unit, and she authorized me to get them, and so Mary and I drove to Grand Island and got the books. We opened the storage unit, there was no furniture, just books. I checked and found that KU did not have 150 of the items, so it was well worth the trip. And Diana, I should add, turned over the books to KU, and we established a Mueller Scholarship Fund in the history department. On Sunday, while packing books to go to the library, I stumbled on this unpublished book called Central America in United States Archives and Libraries, a brief guide for locating primary source material by Gene A. Mueller, January 1968. I really hadn't paid much attention to it at first, but when looking upon it, I see an amazing collection of data about who else has books on Central America. But that's typical of Gene Mueller. Now I just have to say I owe a great deal to Gene and Diana. They've been very helpful. Now I must tell you the story of my relationship with Carlos Melendez Chaveri. He was chair of the History and Geography Department at University of Costa Rica from 1960 to 1969. And he was generally considered one of the top 3 historians of Central America. I taught under his direction the history of the United States in Espanol at the University of Costa Rica in 1966, and we became good friends. And his wife and son both studied at KU. He came to KU to attend a conference in the late 1960s. He told me that he wanted to, while he was here, he told me he wanted to visit the library at the University of Texas. He didn't realize how far away it was. And of course, if you're a Costa Rican, you can get from the Atlantic to the Pacific in 4 hours. And so, but anyway, I wanted to go to the Texas library also. So I said, get in the car and we'll drive to Texas. So we had a good relationship. We stopped for lunch in Oklahoma and went on to Texas and saw their collection. But we thought we had as good a collection as they did in Central America. I visited with him and his family several times at his home in Heredia, Costa Rica, and admired his tremendous library collection. When he retired, he intended to sell his collection to the University of Costa Rica. So UCR tried to hire someone in the U.S. or Mexico. They spent a year trying to find somebody who would do it for what a reasonable sum they thought would be. So the appraisers gave up, and since I happened to be there in Costa Rica, they asked me if I would appraise the collection. I said, yes, you can pay me in books. So in the year 2000, he died after an operation to remove a brain tumor. And Mary and I made 2 separate trips to Costa Rica, working about 2 weeks at each occasion. And I don't remember how much our appraisal was, but I brought this along. This is 4 volumes identifying all the books that he sold to the University of Costa Rica. It took a while to give any kind of prices at all. I would say it's something like $350,000 that week, but I'm just guessing. I can't remember for sure. So that means that for the next several years, from 2002 to 2009, I went to the publication unit at the University of Costa Rica and just picked out whatever I wanted. I just went down the line, picked them up, put them in a suitcase. I got tired of that, and I asked them if they wouldn't send them, and they did. And yes, they began to send the books. So that was a spectacular connection that I've been very pleased with. Now, one more brief story. You're all aware that KU was the first public university to adopt an open access policy. I got very interested in that idea, and I compiled a list of 140 or so theses and dissertations on Central America or by Central Americans at KU, with the help of Ada Emmett, Marion Reed, and one other person's name I'm just now forgetting. In conclusion, I believe that KU's Central American collection will now be at the top of the list. And so I'm ending up on that at that point, and so if you have any questions, I'll try to answer.
Professor Stansifer,
Yes.
the piercing question on my mind is what's going to happen to the banana collection?
Well, the books are leaving the main basement room and going to KU. The bananas are collected in a very small room, so now they get to move into the big room. So if you have anything about bananas that you don't want to keep, someone called me the other day and asked me if I had a banana clock. I said, a banana clock? No, I've never seen a banana clock. Well, he brought it the next day. Yes, there was a question back here.
I thought one time, a couple years ago, you said that maybe Costa Rica connection went back to 1893. Our man Dyke had the popular
Well,
collection at his Dyke Museum Panorama, basically at the Chicago World Fair Exposition,
Yes.
Columbia Exposition, or whatever they call it. And there was a clump, there was a Costa Rican or some Latin American
yes,
person,
well,
and that gave rise to the tropical rainforest part of that panorama.
well, in the book that Costa Rican and I wrote together, we put in a little more details. And yes, we did talk about 1893 and the Chicago Exposition. So that was one of the most important early connections between KU and UCR, because the Kansas exhibit and the Costa Rican exhibit were very close, and the two directors became good friends. And that led to some other connections between Costa Rica. So I didn't think it was desirable to go back too far. But it was a very interesting connection, for sure. Anything else? Well, thank you very much for your attention. Thank you for...
Well, Charlie, thank you so much for that enjoyable talk. Once again, I'd like to express my gratitude, not only for your contribution, but also for your advocacy on behalf of KU Libraries. Your gifts ensure the future of Latin American research, teaching, and learning here at KU and beyond. And for that, we are very, very grateful. Please join me again in thanking Charley. Charley, would you please join me one more minute up here at the podium? I'd like to make a special presentation. Please accept this handcrafted document holder, made especially for you by Whitney Baker, our conservationist at KU Libraries. Where's Whitney? There she is. Whitney, stand up. You know Whitney.
Yes, I do.
The only conservation librarian or conservator in the state of Kansas. If you open it up, you would find a rare book, but you won't find a rare book, but instead a token of our appreciation in the form of a limerick we created just for you.
You better be careful. I have a lot of limericks that I might sing to you.
You haven't heard this one, Charley. Charley, a fan of book and banana, traveled from Costa Rica to Havana. He searched and selected, gave KU what he collected for scholars today and mañana. Presented to Charley Stansifer on behalf of the University of Kansas Libraries, September 22nd, 2011. Charley, a fan of book and banana, traveled from Costa Rica to Havana. He searched and selected, gave KU what he collected for scholars today and mañana. As Charley has so graciously illustrated, the strength of a library is dependent on generous benefactors. Tonight, you have the opportunity to play a role as well. As you leave, you will receive a pledge card tonight, and I ask you to join me in making a gift to KU Libraries in honor of Professor Stansifer. Your gift will ensure Charley's vision and commitment is continued. Thank you, Charley, and thank you, Mary. And thanks to all of you who joined us today on this wonderful occasion. Thank you.